This demonstration is going to show how to make this card using DCD650, our Cottage Garden. And handily, because it's the same size and similar colourway, DCD651, the Cottage Patio Garden, also looks really nice on it. The card we're going to use is an SF30, which is 195 by 195 millimetres, which is about 1/4 inch off of 8 inches square. So we need to line up on the grid lines on the cutting mat, and then these are separated into 10mm segments. So we've got 50, 100, 150. That's 200mm. So that'll be 190, 180. The ruler is segmented into 5mm. So if I place the ruler with the black line on my 180mm line, the actual edge of the ruler will be at 185mm. Just make sure it's square and give it a trim. We're going to use this edge later, so I'll pop that aside. And then the same for the other side to make it square. So that's 180, 185. Just check we've not made any mistakes. That's all good. So we're going to stick it to the card using double-sided tape. You can use whatever you like. If you prefer glue, go with glue. Really, whatever suits you the best. Our double-sided tape is made with a paper centre and paper backing, which makes it easy to tear, which is a lot easier than fiddling about looking for scissors while you're doing this job. I do put a couple across the middle as well, because it's going to support the weight of further panels, and we don't want it to pull away from the card in the centre. I also use a bone folder to just press down on the tape, which makes it adhere firmly to the panel, and it gives it the very best chance of holding over time. Then just a thumbnail and pull it up. I also think that if we press it firmly onto the paper, it makes it easier for removing the backing like this. Okay, give it a nice firm press. Now the wide piece that we first cut off is longer than the paper, which is why I'm using that bit and not the small piece we trimmed off. And we're going to paper punch it. Which paper punch you use doesn't really matter, whatever you have and whatever you like. I'm using this one partly because it's quite a pretty bubbly one, and it's still available, so if you wanted to use the same one you can. So place the paper into the machine. You'll see these little grid lines along with a pattern. So if you line your paper up right on that grid line, that'll be the end of the pattern. Well, to hold it together, I go just a touch beyond. I'm going to trim this as well anyway, so we'll go a little beyond. And press, and then we come out, line up on the pattern and press. Oops, line up on the pattern. The reason I left the end on now, you'll see it actually holds the whole shape together. If that had gone, this little bar would wobble about, and it makes it less stable for lining up. Okay, we'll punch across the whole sheet in that way. There we go. Then we will need a clean up. You get lots of little bits. Now the dots could be useful and the little arcs, but not for this time. So we'll put those in the bin. So here's our punched row. We can cut, but I'll rip that piece off. It's going to be off the end of the page, that's why if I were going to use it, I would actually cut it rather than tear it. Okay, we want to trim to about 30mm, so we're lining up on the cutting mat again and using the grid line. Okay, that's going to go on the edge of the card. I've left a little white beyond the edge of it. If you wanted to go right to the edge you could, but I like the white stripe. So we'll put double-sided tape on the edge. We don't need it on the other edge, I'm going to wrap it with ribbon. So now it's a matter of trying to get it the same at the top and the bottom. So we're just on the circle there. Oops. Just on the circle there, and straight as well at the same time. And then we'll just trim off. Use a ruler for this if you prefer. And there we are. Now, as I said, I'm going to wrap this with ribbon, and I think we might as well do that now. We want the ribbon to come about halfway up the card. We can tie it, but very often I find that means that you're a little bit loose or a little bit tight, and then you've got to adjust it. So I tend to cheat, cut the ribbon. Now you can use double-sided tape or a little dot of Yoo-hoo. Yoo-hoo's my preference for this. Oh, but not quite that much. There we go. That turned out to be a bit too much. So I'll take a bit off with a scrap piece of card. Pop it onto there, and I'll use it on the other side. Okay, we're placing it about in the centre there and about in the centre. Absolute spot on accuracy doesn't matter. And then the little bit of glue we took off the other side we'll pop on here. Now we can pull it as tight as we like, so we're not buckling the card, but it's holding together. And then we can add a bow. For the bow, I tie it any old size and then tinker with it to get the size I want. Pull it nice and tight, hold the knot so it stays a bit firm, and then pull the sides in. I'm cutting roughly in line with the bow, and so we get a nice diagonal. My scissors aren't all that sharp, as I've used them for general crafting, so I have to hold the ribbon really tight. we go. And then I'm going to touch that into the glue. Before it dries up, and pop it on the card. We can puff these out. Then I can set that aside to dry. Now we're going to work on the picture side of things. This is a panel of our textured pink card. I'm using card for this because I'm going to wrap it with ribbon, and if you use paper sometimes it can bow. The decoupage is going to be mounted directly onto this, so, like that. Our decoupage is 118mm, so we need to make it a bit wider for it to fit. So we're going for 125mm. So we've got 100, 120, 125. And we're going just outside the line. Okay, and in the other direction, okay, place it squarely on the catting mat, and we want 145mm. So that's 150, so 145 will be there. And again I'm cutting it just outside the line, which will give us about 145.5. So we want to add a ribbon to the bottom of the card here, about 15mm up. So we could use double-sided tape. I'm going to take the double-sided tape over the edge of the panel, then we can wrap it around to the back, a bit like that. Press it firmly onto the front, and then just wrap the tape to the back. Then if we're removing the backing, place it lightly on the cutting mat because you don't want to stick it at the back there. Take the ribbon a little beyond the end, perhaps not that much there. Place it onto the tape and give it a nice press. Then we can fold that to the back, give it a nice press. Trim that end, and again fold it over and give it a nice press, and then you've got a nice straight firmly attached ribbon. This is going to be mounted onto white, and I use our ECN 180 gram. It's a cheap white card. It's quite a thin card, or heavy paper, whichever way you like to look at it. And I like to use it because you keep consistency and you're not scrabbling around for that little bit of card. You know you want some white, you know you've got white, but you're not quite sure where. It saves all of that. Again, a couple in the centre as well because it's going to support the weight of the decoupage and we don't want it to pull away from the panel. So you can actually trim your panel first if you want to size, but this way I can match the borders once I've stuck the pink on. Okay, if you want a 5mm border, if you pop your ruler onto the card, make sure that the end of the ruler is on a square and the side of the ruler is on a square. Then I'm going to place it on. I'm doing it upside down, then I don't have to fight with the ribbon. When I place a ruler on next time, it's not going over the ribbon. Okay, so now you've given yourself a 5mm top and side border. There we go. And then it's trimming the other two. So we place the ruler on the pink on the first line, which will give us a 5mm trim. And then the other side. So there we have. Okay, now this panel goes onto the dark pink. You need a second sheet of the pink for this because we want an extra, we need more than A4 really, is the truth. And we're going to do the same again, so we'll stick it to the card, to the panel, and trim it around. So place the ruler on top again. So we do the same again from the white, lining up the 5mm. I didn't go all the way across on this in case we sometime want a really nice long piece. So now we want to put this onto the card. So we're going something like that. For this you can actually use the dots as a rough guide, and I want to keep it a bit even between the top and the side, but have a little longer at the bottom. There we go. Then the next part is to place the decoupage on it. And because I'm not able to press down firmly on the back of the decoupage, I use glue for this. So we'll do a line of glue close to the edge, but not right up to the edge. Make sure that there are no strings left on the glue. And then I'll use a scrap piece of card to just spread it. You don't have too long with this. before it dries. But you get, with glue, you get a tiny bit of movement, so that if you want to, if your position's not quite there first time, there we are. Then we just need a small bow for down here. Try to make sure the loops are fairly even. And then we're going to place it somewhere like that. We can either trim this smaller or make this longer. Sharp scissors are good for this, but mine really just aren't. Okay, and then we can actually move the bow loops down if we want to, or you can trim them shorter. Now I have put this onto the card and I end up with a big blob sometimes. Mostly it goes fine, and then sometimes you end up with the biggest blob, so I put it onto card first. Then I can touch the knot of the bow only onto the glue, and then if we touch about there and about there, we can glue some shape into it. So hold your loops up, sorry, hold your tails up while you pop it on, and then we can go give it a bit of shape and hold it there, add a little bit of a bump and hold it there. On the sheets, decoupage sheets, when you use them, there are a few extra little words like this, and I'm going to use those to decorate the ribbon. So we could either have something like "with love" this side, or we could just simply put "Mum" on. So we could do "with love, Mum," or we could do just "Mum." And I think I'm going with just "Mum" on this one. I like it on the white ribbon because then the white of the background fades into the ribbon. I'm going to use Yoo-hoo for this. Pop it in the tweezers first, and then take off any excess glue with a piece of card. Now we could leave the card like that, or we could go a bit further. I like these dots. These are what we call gem dots. They have an extra frilly edge and they can look really quite glitzy and nice. So to jazz this up a bit, we could use these gem dots, and I'm going to insert them under the big holes here. It just gives a little bit of a glimmer, nothing too fancy, and it just lights up the border, I think. If you don't, then just stop it before you get this far. I think they're really quite pretty. They show just the edges through the hole, which is really quite pretty. I'm picking them up on a paper pricking tool. This tends to, you just pop it under the edge and it goes onto the tool. If you keep your finger on top, it helps keep it in position for popping it onto the card. And then we're just pressing on the top to press them into place. Oops. You can actually slide them along a bit, so if you placed it wrong, you can use the pricking tool to just pull it aside, just move it along a bit. So there it is with dots and all. I think they add just a very nice little sparkle, don't you?